press the bell icon on the YouTube app to ensure you never miss a new video from News Laundry.
Hello and welcome to News Laundry Interviews. Today we have two very special guests, our own in many ways, our own Anand Ranganathan.
Hello.
And our own and also News Minutes now, Chitra, Subramaniam. Hi Chitra, who's joining us from Switzerland.
Hello, yeah.
So in fact Chitra, had done a lot of pieces for us when News Laundry just started, and she actually guided us a lot. So thanks for that. And all of you who consume News Laundry know Anand Ranga uncle very well, us, our rock star. Now, many of you also know that the two of them have got together to write a book called The Rat Eaters, which is an e-book, and I have some thoughts on the e-book format. First time I read an e-book.
Right.
Which is, I'll just tell our audience a little about the format before we come to the question answers. It is a novel. It involves a murder. It involves a scientist in love, which I will come to later. And but it's interspersed. So each chapter is interspersed with an essay, which is not a part of the narrative in the sense of fiction. It is more a commentary on what we've just read in the socio-political kind of structure we live in. I haven't read a novel with that format, so that's how it actually rolls. So first, you Chitra, Anand, if you don't mind.
Please.
How did you, decide to write this, and how does the writing really work with you sitting in Switzerland and Anand sitting here in Delhi? Like, do you write a chapter, then he writes a chapter, or were you writing the essays, he writing the narrative? Tell me how this idea came about and how you wrote it, and then we'll come to the plot.
So this is a question for me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for your very kind words of introduction. In fact, I met Anand through News Laundry, some of his writings, and subsequently we got to writing the book. How did the book come about? Anand just called me one day about this book. You recall he'd also come here for a meeting on health, public health. So we were talking about this book, and then he said that I should write what you call the essays, the interconnectors. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what it was, what he wanted me to do. So to be very frank, I was actually quite terrified, because every time I read, first I read the whole book, and then I read the chapter by chapter with a view to writing what I would write after I had read that chapter. And what was going through in my mind was frankly quite terrifying. So I just wrote one of that interconnector or essay and sent it to Anand, and he seemed to like it. And the funny part about this book is that till the very last minute, it almost didn't happen, because I had never seen a book like this, and yet I had to write all those things. It just seemed to be coming out of me. So that's how it happened.
I see. So Anand, the novel narrative, so what I understand is the novel narrative bits are more you, and the essays, the interconnectors are more Chitra. Yeah. Why this format? Once you finish the novel, why did you decide to go down
Right.
this?
So first of all, thanks very much, Abhinandan, for having us, for this interview. Chitra has rightly elucidated, the reason why, she kind of agreed to do so, but the reason is much more deeper, and she is, as always, being too modest. Mm-hmm. The fact is that writing a book that is essentially a story of India through decades, and basically it starts at 1960s and it ends in the early part of the 21st century. Even if a person is an Indian and he's either read the events that have happened or talked about a lot about the events that have happened as he's writing it, I just felt that the core has to be something different. You can tell a story, but where do you place that story? If you place it in the story, if you place the story in the context of India, then sure, there are thousands of novels that are written about. I mean, I have written a couple before this. You know, things just happen, events just happen, and you talk about, you have a few characters, and you know, something happens to them, and the story moves along fine. You know, and this is a murder mystery, or you know, you can call it something else as well. But there has to be, or as I like to call it, I mean, the sum of the parts has to be greater than the whole. You know, for that to happen, you have to place the story in the context of understanding what being in India is for the last 50 years.
That's what the essays do?
That's what the essays do. And so even though the essays, as you correctly said, that you know, they're not really connected to the narrative, but
is there a commentary on the chapter?
It's a commentary on the chapter. It's not, you know, it's sometimes it does concern the plot that has happened. I mean, at the fag end of the book, you do see the narrative picking up the protagonists, you know. So even in the essays, we have mentions of the protagonists, because the story is really moving along. But initially, to make sense of what the reader just read about the chapter, is it just a plot? Is it just the narratives? You know, I mean, the protagonist is going through a sequence of events that has happened. How do you place it in the India that is very much alive, but that is not very much talked of? And let me just give you an example why I thought this was important. I mean, the whole thing stemmed from the fact that it is so sometimes it's so difficult to to disentangle fiction from non-fiction. Essentially, it boils down to that. And I've said it previously. You know, I read a report where a pregnant woman had entered a toilet in a moving train, and she delivered. And we know the Indian toilets, you know, they have a hole. Okay, and the child went down and survived.
I remember that.
The train moved a kilometer down. The people ran, and the child was, you know, happy and healthy. Now I looked at that, I read it, I thought, look, this is obviously fiction. This is impossible.
It couldn't possibly.
But you cross-check, and 3 or 4 reports are mentioning the same thing. There is this baby. There's a mother smiling with the station master, and you know all that stuff. So I mean, how do you make sense of that? And so essentially, I thought the core was missing. And I am a sucker for collaboration, because in science we always have collaboration, but it's very rare in the arts to have, you know, collaborative efforts. You know, especially for fiction.
And writing is generally considered a very lonely kind of activity, and yet very proprietorial. I think that's the correct word. So you don't want. So I'll just tell the audience a little bit. The novel is a commentary on the caste system, and there's a really terrifying sequence of the lower castes being used to amuse the upper castes in this one. It's a commentary on the police system, on crime, on politics, bureaucracy politics, let me put it that way, and on St. Stephen's College, where Anand is from. So, you know, coming to you, Chitra, since you've written the essays, so, I mean, you surely can't take a dispassionate view, but did you ever feel, and if I could be, you know, very honest, by the way, below this interview, you will see my favorite essay of the entire book is the chulbulization of all of us. That was brilliant, Chitra. I love that. That was my favorite.
Thank you.
So I'm going to be using that to put below this interview.
And I have to interrupt you, because of all the 18 interconnectors that Chitra has written, she thought that, oh my God, you know, I don't like this chulbul. I said, what nonsense are you talking about?
Isn't it the best?
This is where her modesty comes in. You know, it's just, it's unbelievable. That essay is really
That one
incredible.
was the best. And I also thought the most prescient, jo bhi kehte hain. So now, you know, this is the first ebook I've written. So in a physical book, I think, because I probably have a bad memory, I keep going to and fro. You know, because who was this? Okay, wait, what have I missed? You know, I just refer to the back. In this book, because going back is slightly more tedious, and the interconnectors sometimes break the plot. You know, like, I think in 85% of the times, you are not in a hurry to see what happens next, but sometimes you want to see, okay, what happened to this guy, what happened to this chick, what happened to the body, or whatever it is. Were you ever afraid that it might make the plot like stop and start? How did you deal with that? I mean, was that your fear, Chitra, that someone will want to know, okay, now what happens next, or beech mein aise aa gaya? Was that another challenge of how to make it, you know, engaging?
No, Abhinandan, no. For me, thanks. The Chulbul thing, I think I wrote in about. I mean, I don't mean to be boastful, but it was the swiftest writing I did because I just found the whole thing so grotesque that it had to be. And then subsequently, I took it off, and Anand and I had a fight. So for people to know, we fought quite a lot during this book because I would take out one chap, a few lines, and he would put it back, and then we wouldn't speak for 2 days. So all that went on. But to come back, no, for me, when I was writing these interconnectors, it became obvious to me that I was throwing people together. The book, the story, and the interconnectors were throwing people off a cliff without any nets. So either you take it or leave it. So either you like the book or you don't like it. There cannot be anything in between.
Sure.
So that is the way I approach the book. And when we recently launched the book in Bangalore, and just a few days before that, somebody who was reading the book told me that the slug is I was born on a bloody road. The blood was my mother's.
Right.
And we go past these people every day. Every day we see poverty, death, destruction, blood on the streets. And this person said to me, but this doesn't happen in India. And
Whoa.
I said, okay, time to write another book, because
Yeah.
I mean, you become so blind.
Yes.
But I think when you live in India, you do need to steel yourself a bit from this, which I appreciate. But to be so blind was unacceptable to me.
Right. So now also in this interview, since I know both of you fairly well, I think, I know a lot of what you believe, and I would just like to ask if, I mean, especially in Anand's case, a lot of, because see, every book is your thoughts, it's your worldview, even if you fictionalize it, it reflects your worldview. Your view of the police force is very bleak. If one was to read the book, it would read, this guy thinks the police force sucks.
Yeah.
It's worth 0 on 10. But I know you. And you actually, in a lot of cases, have a lot of, you give the police force way more credibility than even I would care to give.
Yeah.
Resolve this for me, because the Anand I know
Yeah.
thinks way more highly than police than I think they deserve. And this book gives them no chance.
Right. So I think on a scale of 1 to 100, you probably give the police minus 10. Knowing you, okay. I probably gave it 10. All right, 10 or 15 at best. And the reason for that is, as we all know, over decades, because zero police reforms and the police has been exploited by the politicians for their own means and things of that sort. But that is not to say that there aren't honest, good people in the police force, like the justice system. I mean, last week we've had 3 amazing judgments. Now, I mean, I actually tweeted, I said, look, people don't realize it, but perhaps the only pillar left of democracy is actually justice, is judiciary. That is carrying the whole burden. So a lot of people like that commentary, that tweet. A lot of people said, oh, but you don't know, justice has crumbled. You come to the lower courts, you come to the 15 years it took for the case. So, we can talk about that for every institution.
And then the CBI did have a big role to play in getting this conviction.
Right. Now, if you look, my trust in the CBI.
Sure.
I've always said, look, Caesar's wife. So but in this case, it was the CBI,
right.
The whole point is that's the enigma of our country. At any given point when you think, my God, there is no hope at all, no hope, somebody will come along and restore some little tiny credibility of hope. And maybe that is why this country has always chugged along. And the future may be very bleak, but it's actually not completely down in the dumps. And one of the reasons why, in the end, I don't want to give the plot away, but there is an almost Inspector Clouseau kind of a thing in the way the case is solved. But believe it or not, this kind of investigative practices actually happen. I have seen the police, outside, if there is a crime scene, you border the crime, you kind of...
there it's a free for all.
It's free for all. In fact,
look at the Talwar case. I mean,
Yes.
the cameras, the media was...
everyone is in, और लोग चप्पल में घुस रहे हैं अंदर, कोई DNA उठा लिया without gloves, कोई ये उठा लिया. So it's all...
There's some very funny moments, but ironic, funny, combination things. Chitra, I don't know you as well as I know Anand, but I often find Anand way too cynical and almost bordering on nihilism sometimes. How does it work that do you always have to agree with what you just read to write a chapter on it? And Anand, same thing for you. Do you feel that does this essay, because two smart people cannot always agree, we know that, it's just not possible. How do you comment on a chapter where, while it's fiction, you may not agree with how it's playing along? And Anand, how would you react to an essay that is maybe pointing out something that you may not agree to? Chitra.
I just want to come in on the previous bit on the police, where I do say that, they've been given such a raw deal that we expect them to perform. Somewhere I do stretch out my hand to the police because I've seen how badly they get treated. So when it is their turn to treat somebody, they don't know any better.
Sure.
So that is also there in the book. But to come back to your question, no, absolutely not. In fact, here is how I write. When I write, I can't stand it. Okay? I really can't stand it. And so, and this comes even with the daily copy I write for the News Minute or other people. Whatever I write, I can't stand. I hate it, and thanks for the computers, I can delete everything. So Anand had more problems with that, I think, than with the writing. He had complete freedom. I had complete freedom to write what I want.
But did you always agree with what happened?
I wouldn't put up with anybody. See, my language is very different. It's almost staccato. And, I believe that rhyme and different types of rhyme give different types of weight to a telling of a story, which is why, let's say in Hinduism, you recite recitation in a certain verse, must be in that verse because, as they say, the weight of the verse is almost as important as the weight of the words.
Sure.
So that is how I write, and that is how it comes to me. But no, there was absolutely no. In fact, that is what I found interesting, is that even though we were on the same wavelength, we came to it from very different places, which I think contributes, if I may say so, to the strength of the book.
But about the cynicism or the hopelessness sometimes one feels, of course, I don't want to give away any spoilers, things kind of get solved in some bizarre ways later, but I got this very cynical sense of, and by the way, I didn't know that Chitra had written the essays and Anand the novel, but I could guess by reading it. Was there any disagreement in, this way or that way on what you just read? Or does that add to the strength of the creative? Chitra, you go first.
Me?
Yeah, first Chitra, then Anand. Yeah.
No, in my now we even made fun of ourselves. Like someone said it's like Simon and Garfunkel could compose. If there were two pianos, you guys would be playing on two sides, and it would fit in. No, I don't recall any major disagreement. No, not really. No, I don't recall. But maybe Anand, I could be wrong. I don't recall. The only fights we had was isko nikalo. I don't like this, and he would fight to keep certain lines, and I would fight to take them out. So those were more the fights.
So you're clearly an editor, and you're more the opinion writer.
Yeah.
But tell me, Anand, is my reading of you too? Too inaccurate?
No, I am a nihilist. I've accepted it. It's a fact. That's the reason why I won't quit smoking. But, but to come back to, it's a very important thing that you've raised, and 3 or 4 points here. One is that every chapter has a title, and the title is the title of a very famous book that actually inspires or kind of mirrors what has happened. So, for example, in the
Oh,
really
shit, I didn't.
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
Darkness at Noon.
I could get some of them. I didn't know
Yes.
all of them were.
Yeah, all of them.
All of them.
All of
Okay.
them are. For example, in
Clearly,
the-
I'm not very well read.
No, no. So, for example, the first one is Darkness at Noon, talks about the police station, Kostler's book. The second one is Brave New World, which is the birth of this person. And the one that, as you say, shook you was the entertainment in the Panchayat thing.
Yeah.
That is, and of course, you remember we've had this discussion that if you've not felt it,
Sure,
how can
sure.
you write it?
Yes.
And so, for example, the chapter that really shook you, the chapter 4, where you have this bizarre entertainment, macabre entertainment happening with the Musahar kids, is titled The Invisible Man. Now, that was a very famous book written by Ellison, and there he describes an equally harrowing sequence called Battle Royale. In fact, that's where the phrase comes from, Battle Royale.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Where you have this very intelligent black kid who wants to study further on a scholarship. And these white people, they say, well, okay, we'll give you scholarship, but you go into this bout, boxing match. And he goes into this blindfolded boxing match, almost gets killed. And you have these whites hollering and shouting, come on, blackie, come on, nigger, kill him, And they're throwing pennies at him, a scholarship thing, right? And that is what, so of course I'm not a Musahar, but I just tried to imagine what it was as a black person in Ellison's Battle Royale to what is still going on, right, in our country. So every chapter has this title, and to come back to what Chitra said, in fact, as she said, the commentary sometimes it throws you off without a net, and that is the reason when when they say, okay, to come back to what you were saying, does Chitra share the cynicism that I have? Sure, at some length, everyone has to. I mean, in our country, you have to be cynical. But
equally, you have to be optimistic. Otherwise, you would never get by one day.
Right, that is true. Or you can be immune to,
Sure.
like one of the characters said, look, why are you so perturbed about things happening? You don't have power, you get inverter. You don't have, this thing, you get,
Security.
you hate potholes, you get a lovely car, you skim over them. So there are people who think like that, But on the other hand, Chitra being a journalist, and I think journalists, the prose, I'm just talking of the prose because for 30 years her writings have appeared in newspapers. They have they've basically broken or exposed scams and things of that sort. The literary value of her writings has been not appreciated because of the sheer content value of it.
Right.
Okay, I approached her writings from the literary value. And I can see the difference where, I may take a flight of fancy, soaring on the wings of fiction. But every word that she says has a density. There's a rhythm to writing literature. So I think it's by habit. So when, she's asked to write 800 words, it will be 800 words.
Yeah.
So she would pack it in like, black hole is so dense. So the density is there, and that kind of somehow gets reflected in the words that she chooses. So I may blabber on, I may choose, for example, in a sentence, 5 words would be supportive words. They may not mean much. The sentence on its entirety may mean much, but in Chitra's case, there are sentences that are 1 word long, 2 word long.
In fact, that's a style of hers.
Yes.
Like that's staccato
And
style.
that comes from being a journalist and kind of appreciate it's pithy, laconic.
Okay, Chitra, this is you've used the word "we" fairly often in the essays, and I guess by that "we" you mean Indians.
Us Indians.
Us Indians, yeah. So, and some of the some of the stuff for audience what Chitra says is very true and very hard hitting, and like you said, you get desensitized to a lot of the ugly, hideous world we live in, but we don't notice because while driving, you just got. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to live. But you think the real mirror that you have, kind of tried to put in front of society, and sometimes it's pretty unforgiving. That broad "we" is a little too broad a generalization because I definitely in some of those "we's" don't say no. I don't think like that. I refuse to be party of that. I'm almost offended that no, I'm not that guy. Do you use that word "we" after a certain thought? Like, why we? Why so broad?
Yeah, so by we, what I mean is we as human beings, the entire human species. Human beings are born stupid and intelligent all over the world, and half my family is European, so I can see the same types of situations across countries and cultures. But of course, the immediate examples I use are Indian because I know a lot about India. But the book talks also about say sound preference in Europe or other issues that I have seen in Europe similar to India. So the we is more general in the context of human beings, but there are more examples from India and fewer examples from Europe. So, but of course, there are people in our own circles who don't agree with what I say. So, my we would be beyond India, but with Indian references and some European references as well. I'll give you one line which Anand keeps repeating, and this time I will repeat. I think I start one chapter by saying, "Do naphthalene balls tell stories?"
Yes.
Now, every time I open a cupboard at home, there is this naphthalene ball smells. It tells me different naphthalene balls tell me different stories. And I don't think my experience is unique. I think when people read that, they came back and said, Jesus, it brought me back those kinds of memories, whatever. So I think that the book was not meant to offend. If it has offended, then I will live with it. But I've also written about Indian culture, about in Hindu philosophy. We are a very deep, deep, deep society, and
Sure.
we've got to see where we are coming from and where we are going, and not just get carried away by what we see is for 100 years. Where I get impatient, I think I get a bit impatient in India, is that we are happy with too little, you know.
I
And
agree. Where are we going, Chitra?
I'm very ambitious for India, very, very ambitious.
So when you say where we've come from, where we are going, in your view, where are we going?
That's the problem. You see, the absence of ambition among Indians across the board. Yes, we have one or two or three or four or 20 or 30 or 40 people. But when you have genuine ambition for India, and I genuinely believe I do, it hurts me to settle for so little on
Right.
and to pick and choose on the basis of caste or religion or this or that. Uh, to me, there is no real competition in India. Competition itself is stifled. So when competition is stifled, how can you excel?
Right. Anand, there's one line, and in fact, Chitra, the bit you're talking about the naphthalene balls, I remember
That's an amazing line, by the way. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
And in the book, it's also how the Stephanian describes herself about her marriage.
Right.
That was very nice. That was a nice touch. But Anand, there is a line where you said there is no point in getting angry. But the book is angry.
Yeah.
I can tell. Are you an angry person?
Yes.
How did it? But yet there is a lot of lines about there's no point in getting angry.
Yeah, and I'll
So
tell you.
is there or isn't there? Resolve that for me.
It's just one of those.
Or is it
conundrums.
inevitable?
No, I think it is inevitable because you may think of 1,000 issues that trouble you. I mean, I step out of the house, and immediately I see 10 things that I would not see in America or in Europe or in developed world, but I see it every day. I stop at a traffic light, I see it, and the person who says, "Why are you angry?" is the person who's actually rising very fast in life.
Yes.
I mean, the protagonist, Biswal, IPS officer. And he says something which also troubles me. He says, "Look, I'm here to do my job, which is being a police officer, an honest police officer, something. If I do the job of the municipal guy, if I do the job of the garbage collector, if I do of the road maker, then bastard, who will do my job?" Now, this is a question that hits me every day. If I see a bad road, if I see the power connection gone, if I see there is no water, if I were to come onto the streets to protest, look, this is not, who is going to police? So the guy who's saying this, why be angry? Find out a route. But at the same time, if you find out a route, which is an alternative one, if you for example, as he says, if
Which we call jugaad.
I mean, it's actually not just jugaad. He's saying you buy a great Mercedes if you want to skim over the potholes.
Right.
And in a way, that's actually correct. You know, if you buy a Maruti 800, you would still feel the potholes, but if you buy a Jaguar, you probably won't. So there is even a gradation, and as Chitra puts it, we are judged by the length of our bookshelves, the size of our house, it just keeps on. There is no end to this, But the same guy who's a millionaire, who has this huge house, will say, ki bhai, we came naked, we will go naked. If you think like that, what you're doing is you're making yourself immune to the quote unquote diseases and the problems that there are. It's not an easy question, believe me, but it hits you, and I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, is writing a book like this, is it cathartic, or does it even make you even more angry? Does it remind you of stuff? How emotionally, how did you react to
again,
writing?
half and half. When you're writing it, then you feel good because you're asking, just the point of asking the question is liberating in some sense, because you've shared it. It is the anger is no longer yours, but it is an unsolved question.
How about you, Chitra? Is writing something like this cathartic, or does it actually get you even more worked up at the hopelessness of it all?
For me, it was good to get it out of my system, because I needed to say this it helped me understand a whole lot of things, human interactions or lack of it. Anger, yes, but I think it helped me channel my outrage. It helped me channel my the questions I had. But did it make me less angry? I don't think it made me less angry. I think I'm a little more composed now. I don't think I can write anything like this again. I don't think so. And I'm not even sure I would want to. This is a one-shot thing. But I'm not at all a pessimist. On the contrary, but had I not written this book, I could not have continued to be an optimist. It's because I believe that I don't want to give the plot away. It's because I believe that the story of the protagonist is so strong that I think there are thousands of that kind of persons in India. And I think the time has come for those type of people to take away. We speak of the democratic dividend, and we go on and on. This is the democratic dividend that needs to be given jobs, that needs to be set free.
Right.
How India will be, where are we going? I don't think we need to know, where someone is born. My late father always said to me, it doesn't matter where anybody is born. It's important where they want to go. But we don't even allow people to go anywhere. You see, that to me is where the fight is. That's the fight. And for that, I'm not willing to settle for second best.
Right.
And if I can just butt in here, when Chitra says this is a one-off, I truly believe that, because, as she said, our fights were mostly for me to, you cannot delete that, you have to keep that, that is amazing. And she would say, no, I hate that. And, there is a sequence there where the Greek philosophers are having a kavali with the Indian philosophers. It is mind-boggling. You don't get such things. As Naipaul said, there is no such thing as a writer prodigy. You are the sum of your experiences.
Sure.
And of course, there's so much that has happened in Chitra's life that she's like packed it in. And when the editors came to us and say, well, you can keep or you can delete what you want. And I saw Chitra's proof. I said, look, everything was in red. I said, what are you doing? Yes. And she said, oh, I hate this. I said, no. So it was a brilliant to and fro. It was almost like a kavali thing, between me and Chitra. I said, keep this. He said, no, delete this.
Yeah, there's some very, very interesting and almost bizarre and clever devices used. Now, one thing, Anand, I find the Stevens experience as a scientist who's in love, any first hand, is that coming from some autobiographical?
Yeah, well, the ragging thing and all those things are.
Of course,
yes. And about the love thing, I'm not too sure.
You should discuss that. Okay, no, but there's this line. Have we? How do you interfere with nature? You feed cows offal. Is offal how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Offal. which is the bone crushed, which caused mad cow, right?
Yes.
So again, I'm coming to, I know your scientific temperament, your entire belief that if our species is to survive and become evolved, science will play the pivotal role. And we've discussed CRISPR.
Right.
Just purely, since I know you, do you consider, and you're a huge, supporter of CRISPR.
Yes.
And this line, again, resolve that for me. Is that interfering with nature? Is that not interfering with nature?
Well, it's a bit difficult to say. I mean, I think that's in the commentary, that we, but...
Oh, right, sorry, that was the essay. Okay.
Right, but I mean, there again, if I can just jump in, which is, I mean, it is a fact that people in the West, they primarily, because they have used, cattle for consumption purposes, it is but natural for them to actually make the cattle bigger and larger and larger and larger, you see. So if you were to see, for example, 150 years ago, the size of the cattle in the West, it was fairly comparable to the size of the cattle which we still have in India. But there, because it was primarily used for, for milk production, that also they have done a lot of genetic engineering to increase the milk production, whereas we have done breeding. But to increase the sheer size of the, the meat, okay, they have resorted to purposes which have in many ways led to mad cow disease. I mean, there is a direct correlation.
Sure.
So, it is a natural progression, you can say, for, I mean, this is where capitalism comes in. You want per...
maximize profit.
It's horrible for me saying it, but, per cattle, how much meat can you... So, it's a natural thing.
But
it would happen. You can't stop.
Since Chitra, you wrote that, do you see is CRISPR interfering with nature, or what is your stand on it? I know it's not, but it just so happened that I was reading the book at the same time.
Yes.
I was reading this piece on CRISPR,
Right.
so it just immediately connected. I just like to know your view on that.
See, there are two. Sorry, I do. I live I live with what's called multiple myeloma, which is a cancer, and I had a stem cell transplant. In fact, I'm glad I advocate for access to medicines. I speak openly about it. So all this was also happening during that process of stem cells. Now, there are some people who think that would be interfering. There are some people who would never go through a stem cell transplant. I know people around me who would not do it. So you've got to be intelligent about what you think you are doing with science. When I'm reading, about the Genome Project or projects of creating a human being out of science, there's a big question mark in my head because, multiple organ transplants, we have not even been succeeding in able to do that.
Sure.
There are limits to what human beings can do. And I do believe, I'm a believer, and Anand is not. So we used to have these fights on that. But to come back to the mad cow disease, I mean, the cow is a vegetarian, and then you make the cow eat a cow.
Sure.
And then you call the cow mad. How does that add up? You see? And so somewhere, the arrogance of the human being is what I think I tried to say in that interconnector, because I myself was going through the advantages of science and technology. So my view on this is that there is more to life than science and technology, and I don't believe like Anand does that. I'm a believer, and he's not. But I think somewhere in the book, when I speak about the Vedas and all, he was curious. He got curious.
Right.
Yes.
And he read the Bhagavad Gita, or did you not say that? You said that to me.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is why I think this book is strong, because it's a very large panoply of issues we get into.
Yeah, it does. It explores a very large canvas.
And just to add to that,
I don't know if that answers your question. I have a great admiration for scientists, but to me, a human scientist is someone I find very attractive, like an oncologist who can talk about his or her own limitations. Yes, science can do this, but science cannot do that.
Sure.
That is one straight answer. Then there is a moral and ethical issue.
Right.
And that to me are personal. That's a
Yeah.
personal
And those
journey.
are a lot more complex and contextual as well.
Yes,
It's a very long
yes.
one.
So you cannot undermine that kind of scientific progress because your own personal or moral issue is not resolved.
Sure.
Yeah,
Do
Anand,
I
very well
answer your
said. Yeah.
question?
yes, it
Yeah,
does.
you did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Anand?
two aspects of this question and the previous one that you asked, I like to say is explored in the book, which is how readily we internalize the goings on in our country. Just to give you an example, we have in the second chapter, Brave New World, where Kalki is Akhil is born. You have the father who comes from the lowest of the low caste, considered untouchable, Musahar, and in the 60s, obviously untouchable. They are manual scavengers. Even now, yes. And then, so he has been shunned by the traditional Hindu, the way of things in temples, and in fact, Chitra writes, in fact, even now there are places where if the shadow falls, you are supposed to go, and take a bath, and. So there, when the 10th child is to be born, first 9 are girls. You see, he's been shunned by the society so much, but still he says he will be my savior. He's the Dasavatar. So you see, the internalization is so, complete, that you may be shunned for centuries, but you've internalized it to such an extent that when something happens, something good is happening,
You connect the mythology.
you connect to the mythology that after 9 girls, we have this boy, and I see him. I may have been shunned, my ancestors have been shunned, and basically so much of horrific things have been done to them, but I'm going to call him Kalki. This is my Dasavatar. And in the second part of it, there is again one chapter down the road, it's called The Death of the Heart, where you have the Brahmin father of the son, the girl, and he is so pally and so friendly with the guy, who's a rat eater, because the Sukumar, he thinks is Sukumaran
Brahminical.
Iyengar. Everything's going well. Suddenly he says, no, I'm a Chamar. And then, you talk about science in general thing. He says, look, sir, just tell me what do I have to do. I will convert to a Muslim. He says, well, that's only slightly less worse. Then he says, no, I will do blood transfusion. And he says, you don't fool me, boy. There is no such thing as a 2-month Brahmin, right? I've actually heard this being said.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Yes.
They say that you might come out with Brahmin blood, but in 2 months, your own bone marrow will start producing.
Are you serious?
Yes. You see, so
Abhinandan, I do want to interfere here.
Yes.
Because what Anand is telling you is very true.
Are you?
How do you know whose blood? I had an autologous transplant, so my own blood. Some people had to take, go through the more traditional, the other way. This question of whose blood is running in your veins has become an issue, not just in India, but also in Europe.
Oh my
People talk
God.
about it. It's unbelievable. So this is the pettiness of human beings. It's
internalization to the
it's
extreme.
pettiness of human beings.
And look at the guy. The guy says, "I know my biology. You don't fool me."
Right.
So that's the way it is.
Anyway, thank you so much. First of all, I'm sorry it took me so long to read. Can I just make an appeal to all publishers? While I'm sure technology and ebooks are the future, for 40 plus people, do take out a certain amount of physical books, because the swiftness with which one deals with the physical book is way more than what one deals with the. So the Rat Eater, I cannot show you a copy because there isn't, but check it out. It is a commentary on India, on caste system, on politics, bureaucracy, and it is a book like I haven't read in format and structure both. And thank you so much, Chitra, for joining us.
Thank you, Chitra.
Thank you.
And thanks, Anand.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I'll see you on the Hafta.
Yeah, absolutely.
And The Rat Eater by Anand, Ranganathan and Chitra Subramaniam. Check it out. It's on Juggernaut Books. You can download it in the link below.